there folks, and welcome to this video. Now this was a stream that I did a few days ago. It was for a friend. He asked me to read The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, the first chapter, in Unexpected Party, and so I did it. Now this will be a one-time thing, so don't expect it too often, and I hope you enjoy. There is some singing in this stream, so I don't know if you want to hear me sing. There are timestamps in the description. Chapter 1: An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and a nosy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door shaped like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened into a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with panelled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for cats and coats. The hobbit was fairly fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on, going fairly straight, but not quite, into the side of the hill. The hill, as the people from many miles around called it, and many round doors opened out of it, first on the left and then on the right. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, wardrobes, whole rooms devoted to clothes, kitchens, dining rooms, were all on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side, for these were the only ones that have windows, deep-set round windows, overlooking his gardens and the meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit. His name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighbourhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were very rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without bothering of asking him. This was a story of how a Baggins had an adventure, and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. He may have lost the neighbour's respect, but he gained, well, you'll see whether he gained anything in the end. The mother of our particular hobbit. What is a hobbit? I suppose hobbits need some description nowadays, since they have become quite rare and shy of the big people, as they call us. They are a little people, about half our height, and smaller than the bearded dwarves. Hobbits have no beard. There's little to no magic about them, except the ordinary everyday sort, which helps them disappear quietly and quickly when large, stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making noise like elephants which they can hear a mile off. They are inclined to be fat in their stomach. They dress in bright colours, wear no shoes because their feet grow naturally leathery soles, and thick, warm brown hair like the stuff on their heads. They have long, clever brown fingers, good-natured faces, and laugh a deep, fruity laugh. Now you know enough to go on with. As I was saying, the mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins that is, was the famous Belladonna Took, one of the 3 remarkable daughters of the old Took, head of the hobbits, who lived across the water, a small river that ran at the foot of the hill. It is often said that long ago one of the Took ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That, of course, was absurd, but certainly there was still something not entirely hobbit-like about them, and once in a while the members of the Took clan would often go and have adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed it up, but the fact remained that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Bagginses, though they were undoubtedly richer. Not that Belladonna Took ever had any adventures after she became Miss Bungo Baggins. Bungo, that was Bilbo's father, built the most luxurious hobbit hole for her that was to be found either side of the hill, or over the hill, or across the water. And there they remained to the end of their days. Still, it is probable that Bilbo, her only son, although he looked and behaved exactly like a second edition of his solid and comfortable father, got something a bit queer from his makeup of the Took side. Something that only waited for a chance to come out. The chance never arrived until Bilbo Baggins was grown up, being about 50 years or so. and living in the beautiful Hobbit hole built by his father, which I just described for you, until he had in fact apparently settled down immovably. By some curious chance one morning long ago in the quiet of the world, where there was much less noise and more green and the hobbits were still numerous and prosperous, and Bilbo Baggins was standing at his door after breakfast smoking an enormous long wooden pipe that reached down nearly to his woolly toes. Gandalf came by. Gandalf. If you have heard only a quarter of what I've heard of him, and I've only heard very little of what there is to hear, you'll be prepared for any sort of remarkable tales. Tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went, in the most extraordinary fashion. He had not been down that way under the hill for ages and ages, not since his friend the Old Took died. In fact, the hobbits almost had forgotten what he looked like. He had been away over the hill and across the water on businesses of his own since they were all small hobbit boys and hobbit girls. All that the unexpected Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall, pointed blue hat, a long grey cloak, a silver scarf over his long white beard hung over below his waist, and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining, and the grass was very green, but Gandalf looked at him from under his long bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it's a good morning whether I want it or not? Or do you feel good this morning, or is it a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo, "and a very fine morning to you, and a fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors, into the bargain. If you have a pipe about you, sit down and have a fill of mine. There's no hurry, we have a whole day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on the seat by his door, crossing his legs, and blew out a beautiful grey ring of smoke that sailed up into the air without breaking, and floated away across the hill. "Very pretty," said Gandalf, "but I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share an adventure that I'm arranging, and it's very difficult to find anyone." "I should think so in these parts. We are plain quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner." "I can't think of what anyone sees in them," said old Mr. Baggins, and stuck one thumb behind his braces, and blew out even a bigger smoke ring. Then he took out his morning letters and began to read, pretending to take no more notice of the old man. He had decided that he was not quite his sort and wanted him to go away, but the old man did not move. He stood leaning on his stick and gazing at the hobbit without saying anything until Bilbo got quite uncomfortable and a little bit cross. "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might want to try over the hill or cross the water." By this he meant the conversation was at an end. "What a lot of things you use good morning for," said Gandalf. "Now you mean that you want to get rid of me, and it won't be good until I move off." Not at all, my dear sir. Let me think. I don't think I know your name." Yes, my dear sir, and I do know your name, Mr. Baggins, and you do know my name, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. To think that I should have lived to be Good Morning by Belladonna Took's son, as if I was selling buttons at the door. Gandalf, good gracious me, not the wandering wizard that gave Old Took a pair of magic diamond studs that fastened themselves and never came undone until ordered. Not the fellow that used to tell such wonderful tales at parties about dragons and goblins and giants and the rescue of princesses and the unexpected luck of widows' sons. Not the man that used to make particularly excellent fireworks. I remember those. Old Took used to have them on Midsummer's Eve. Splendid. They used to go out in great lilies and snapdragons and lanterns of fire and hang it in the twilight all evening. You will probably notice that Mr. Baggins was not quite so frosty as he liked to believe, and also that he was very fond of flowers. Dear me, he went on, not the Gandalf that was responsible for so many quiet lads and lasses going off into the blue for mad adventures. Anything from climbing trees to visiting elves or sailing in ships, sailing to other shores. Bless me, life used to be quite you used to upset things badly in these parts once upon a time. I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business. Well, what would I be, said the wizard. All the same, I'm pleased to find that you remember some things about me. You seem to remember my father's kindly at any rate, and it is not without hope. Indeed, for you, your old grandfather's sake, and for the sake of poor Belladonna, I will give you what you asked for. I beg your pardon, I haven't asked for anything. Yes, you have, twice now. My pardon, I give it to you. In fact, I'll go so far as to send you on this adventure. Very amusing for me, very good for you, and profitable too, and very likely if you ever get over it. Sorry, I don't want any adventures, thank you, not today. Good morning, but please, do come to tea, any time you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow, goodbye. And with that, the Hobbit turned and scuttled inside his round green door, and shut it as quickly as he dared, not to seem rude. Wizards, after all, were wizards. What on earth did I ask him for tea for? He said to himself after he went to the pantry. He only just had breakfast, but he thought a cake or two and a drink of something would do him good after his fright. Gandalf, in the meantime, was still standing outside the door and laughing long but quietly. After a while, he stepped up and, with a spike on his staff, scratched a queer sign on the Hobbit's beautiful green front door. Then he strode away, just about the time when Bilbo was finishing his second cake and beginning to think that he escaped adventures very well. The next day, he had almost forgotten about Gandalf. He did not remember things very well unless he put them down in his engagement tablet, like this. Gandalf, tea, Wednesday. Yesterday, he had been too flustered to do anything of the sort. Just before tea time, there came a tremendous ring on the front doorbell, and he remembered. He rushed to put on the kettle and put out another cup and saucer and an extra cake or two and ran to the door. I'm so sorry to keep you waiting, said he was going to say, when he thought that it was not Gandalf at all. It was a dwarf with a blue beard tucked into a gold belt and very bright eyes under his dark green hood. As soon as the door was open, he pushed inside, just as if he has been expected. He hung his hooded cloak on the nearest peg, and, "Drawn at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins at yours," said the Hobbit, too surprised for any questions for the moment. When the silence that followed became uncomfortable, he added, "I'm just about to make tea. Pray come and have some with me." And a little stiff perhaps, but he meant it kindly. What else would you do if an uninvited dwarf came and hung his things in your hall without a word of explanation? They had not been at the table for long. In fact, they hardly reached the third cake when another, even louder ring at the bell. "Excuse me," said the Hobbit, and off he went to the door. So you got here at last." That's what he was going to say to Gandalf this time, but it was not Gandalf. Instead, it was another very old-looking dwarf on the step with a white beard and a scarlet hood. He too hopped inside as soon as the door opened, and just as he'd been already invited. "I see they've begun to arrive already," he said when he caught sight of Dwallin's green hood hanging up. He hung his red one next to it, and "Balin, at your service," he said with his hand on his breast. "Thank you," said Bilbo with a gasp. It was not the correct thing to say, but they have begun to arrive had flustered him badly. He liked visitors, but he liked to know them before they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. He had a horrible thought that the cake might run short, and he, as the host, he knew his duty and stuck to it, however painful he might have to go on without. "Come on in and have some tea," he managed to say after a deep, long breath. "A little beer would suit me better if all the same to you, my good sir," said Balin with the white beard. "But I don't mind some cake, seed cake, if you have any." "Lots," Bilbo found himself answering to his own surprise, and he found himself scuttling off to the cellar to fill a pint beer mug, and to the pantry to fetch 2 beautiful round seed cakes, which he had baked that afternoon for his after-supper morsel. When he got back, Balin and Dwalin were talking at the table like old friends. Bilbo plumped down the beer and the cake in front of them when a loud ring came from the bell again, and another ring. Gandalf was certain this time, he thought, as he puffed down along the passage, but it was not. It was 2 more dwarves, both with blue hoods, silver belts, and yellow beards, and each of them carried a bag of tools and a spade. In they hopped as soon as the door began to open. Bilbo was hardly surprised at all. "What can I do to you, my dwarves?" he said. "Killy at your service," said one, and Filly at the other, and they both took off their blue hoods and bowed. "At yours and your family's," replied Bilbo, remembering his manner this time. "Dwalin and Bolin are already here, I see," said Gilly. "Let's join the throng." "Throng," thought Mr. Baggins. "I don't like the sound of that. I must sit down for a minute and collect my wits and have a drink." He had only just had one sip in the corner while the four dwarfs sat round the table and talked about mines and gold and trouble with the goblins and the depreciations of the dragons and lots of other things which he did not understand and did not want to, for they sounded too adventurous. When, ding-dong, his bell rang again, as if some little naughty hobbit boy was trying to pull the handle off. "Someone's at the door," he said, blinking. "Some four, I say by the sound," said Philly. "Besides, we saw them coming along behind us in the distance." The poor little hobbit sat down in the hall and put his head in his hands and wondered what had happened, and what was going to happen, and whether they would all stay for supper. And then the bell rang again, louder than ever, and he had to run to the door. It was not 4 after all, it was 5. Another dwarf had come along when he was wandering in the hall. He had hardly turned the knob before they were all inside, bowing and saying "at your service," one after another. Dory, Nori, Rory, Owen, Goen, and Gloin were their names. And very soon 2 purple hoods, a grey hood, a brown hood, and a white hood were hanging on the pegs, and off they marched with their broad hands stuck in their gold and silver belts to join the others. Already it had almost become a throng. Some called for ale, some for porter, one for coffee, and all of them for cakes. So the hobbit was very busy for a while. A big jug of coffee has been set down in the hearth. The seed cakes were all gone, and the dwarfs were starting around a butter scones. And then came a loud knock, not a ring, but a hard rat-tat on the beautiful green door. Somebody was banging with a stick. Bilbo rushed down the passage, very angry and altogether bewildered and bewildered. This was the most awkward Wednesday he had ever remembered. He pulled open the door with a jerk, and they all fell in, one on top of each other. More doors, 4 more, and there was Gandalf standing behind, leaning on his staff and laughing. He had made quite the dent in the bureau door, and he had also, by the way, knocked out the secret mark that he had put there in the morning before. "Carefully, carefully," he said. "It's not like you, Bilbo, to keep friends waiting at the mat," and then opened the door like a popgun. "Let me introduce Biffa, Boffa, Bomber, and especially Thorin." "At your service," said Biffa, Boffa, and Bomber, standing in a row, and they hung up 2 yellow hoods and a pale green one, and also a sky blue one with a long silver tassel. This last belonged to Thorin, an enormously important dwarf. In fact, no one other than the great Thorin Oakenshield himself was not too pleased at falling upon Bilbo's mat with Biffa, Boffa, and Bomber on top of him. For one thing, Bomber was immensely fat and heavy. Thorin indeed was very haughty and said nothing about service, but poor Mr. Baggins said he was so sorry so many times that at last he grunted, "Pray don't mention it," and stopped frowning. "Now we are all here," said Gandalf, looking at the row of his 13 hoods, the best detachable party hoods, and his own hat gathering on the pegs. "A quite merry gathering. I hope there's something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that, tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me." "And for me," said Thorin. "And raspberry jam and apple tart," said Biffa. "And mince pie and cheese," said Boffa. "And pork pie and salad," said Bomber. "And more cakes and ale and coffee, if you don't mind," called the other dwarfs to the door. "And put a few eggs on there, that's a good fellow," Gandalf called after him after the hobbit stumbled into pantries. "And just bring out the cold chicken pickles. Seems to know as much about my lardos as I do myself," thought Mr. Baggins, who was feeling positively flummoxed, and was beginning to wonder whether the most wretched adventure had not come right into his house. By the time he had got all the plates and dishes and knives and forks and glasses and plates and spoons and all things piled up on big trays, he was getting very hot and red in the face and very annoyed. "Confiscate and bother these dwarfs," he said aloud. "Why don't they come and lend a hand?" Lo and behold, there stood Bolin and Dwalin in the door of the kitchen, and Philly and Killy behind them, and before he could say knife, they whisked away the trays and a couple of small tables into the parlour and set everything out afresh. Gandalf sat at the head of the party with the 13 dwarfs all round, and Bilbo sat on a stool at the fireplace nibbling on a biscuit. Tried to look as if this was all perfectly ordinary and not at least an adventure. The dwarves ate and talked, and time got on. Last they put the chairs backwards, and Bill made a move to collect the plates and glasses. "I suppose you'll all be staying for supper?" he said in his most politest, unpressing tones. "Of course," said Thorn, "and after that we shan't be getting the business till late, and we must have some music first. Now clear up." Thereupon the 12 dwarves, not Thorn, he was too important, and stayed talking to Gandalf, jumped to their feet, and made 12 piles of all the things. Off they went, not waiting for the trays, balancing columns of plates, each with a bottle on top, in one hand, while the hobbit ran after them, almost squeaking in fright. "Please be careful, and please don't trouble, I can manage." But the dwarves started to sing. "Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Smash the bottles and burn the corks. Cut the cloth and drain the fat. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. Splash wine on every door. Dump the crooks in a boiling bowl. Pound them with a thumping paw. And when you're finished in the hole, send them down the hall to roll. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates, so carefully with the plates." And of course they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away safely, as quick as lightning, while the hobbit was turning round and round in the kitchen, trying to see what they were doing. Then they were back, and found Thorn with his feet on the fender, smoking a pipe. He was blowing the most enormous smoke rings, and wherever he told one to go, it went. Up the chimney, or behind the clock, around the mantelpiece, or under the table, or round and round the ceiling. But wherever it went, it was not quick enough to escape Gandalf. Pop! He sent a smaller smoke ring from his short clay pipe straight through each one of Thorn's. Then Gandalf's smoke ring would go green and come back to hover over the wizard's head. He had a cloud about him already, and in the dim light it made him look as strange as sorceress. Bilbo stood still and watched. He loved smoke rings, and then he blushed to think how proud he had been yesterday morning of the smoke rings he had sent over the wind, over the hill. "Now for some music," said Thorn. "Bring out the music. Bring out the instruments." Gilly and Philly rushed to their bags and brought some fiddles. Dory and Nori and Owen brought out flutes from somewhere inside the coats. Bob produced a drum from the hall. Biffa and Boffa went out too and came back with clarinets that they had left among the walking sticks. Thorn and Bolton said, "Excuse me, I left mine on the porch." "Just bring mine in with you," said Thorn. And they rushed back with vials as big as themselves, and with Thorn's harp wrapped in a green cloth. It was a very beautiful golden harp, and when Thorn struck it, the music began all at once. So sudden and sweet that Bilbo forgot everything else, and was swept away into the dark lands, under strange moons far over the water, and very far from his hobbit hole under the hill. The dog came into the room from the little window that opened to the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and they still played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down. The shadows were lost, and they still played on. And suddenly the first one and then another began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing out of the halls of deep places of their ancient homes, and this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to seek that pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells, in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow holes beneath the fells. For ancient king and elvish lord, there many a gleaming golden hoard they shaped and wrought, and light they caught to hide in gems, on hilt or sword, on silver necklace they strung the flowering stars, on crowns they hung. The dragons are in twisted wire, they mesh the light of moon and sun. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to claim our long forgotten gold. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man dwells. They lay there long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. The pines were roaring on the height, the winds were moaning in the night. The fire was red, it flaming spread, the trees like torches blaze with light. The bells were ringing in the dale, and men looked up with faces pale. The dragons are more fierce than fire, laid low their towers and houses frail. The mountains smote beneath the moon, the dwarves, they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall to dying fall, beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim, we must away at break of day, to win our harps and gold from him. As they sang, the Hobbit fell in love with beautiful things made by hands and cunning, and met by magic moving through him. A fierce and a jealous love, the desire of hearts of dwarves. Then something Turkish woke up inside of him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains, and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls, and explore the caves, and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out the window. The stars were out in the dark sky above the trees. He thought of jewels of dwarfs shining in the dark heavens. Suddenly the wood beyond the water a flame leapt up, probably someone lighting a wood fire, and he thought of plundering dragons, setting his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was plain old Mr. Baggins of Bag End under hill again. He got up trembling. He had left less than half a mind to go fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to, and go hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until the dwarves had all gone away. Suddenly he found that the music and singing had stopped, and they were all looking at him, with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorn, in a tone that seemed to show that he guessed both halves of the Hobbit's mind. "What about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "We like the dark," said all the dwarves. "Dark for dark business, and there are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool and sat on the fender, knocking over a poker and the shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf, "let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together in the house of our fine friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out. All praises ale and wine." He paused for breath and for a polite remark from the hobbit, but the compliment was quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who wagged his mouth in protest at being called audacious, and most of all, a fellow conspirator. Although no noise came out, he was so flummoxed, so Thorin went on. "We are met to discuss our plans, our means, our ways, policy, and devices. We shall soon, before the break of day, start on our long journey, a journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our object is well known to us all, to the estimable Mr. Baggins, and to perhaps one or two of the younger dwarves. The exact situation at the moment may require a brief explanation." This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he had been allowed, he would probably have gone on like this until he was out of breath, without telling anyone there anything that was not known already. But he was really interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't bear any longer. At "may never return," he began to feel a shriek coming up from inside, and very soon it burst out like a whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All the dwarfs sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a bright blue light on the end of his magic staff, and in his fireworks glare, the poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like a jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor and kept calling out, struck by lightning, over and over again. And that was all they could get out of him for a very long time. So they took him and laid him out of the way in the drawing-room sofa with a drink at his elbow, and they went back to their dark business. "Excitable little fellow," said Gandalf, as they sat down. "Gets funny queer fits, but he's one of the best, as fierce as a dragon in a pinch." If you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only a poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit. Even the old Took's great-granduncle Bulrora was so huge that he could ride a horse. He charged into the ranks of goblins of Mount Graham in the Battle of Green Fields and knocked their king, Golfbimble's head clean off with a wooden club, and sailed for hundreds of yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole. And in this way the battle was won and the game of golf invented at the same moment. In the meanwhile, however, Bulrora, gentlest descendant, was reviving in the drawing room. After a while and a drink, he crept nervously into the door of the parlour, and this is what he heard. Glowin speaking. Well, what will he do you think? It is all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all of his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think it sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, had it not been for the sign on the door, I would have been sure we'd come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped my eyes on the little fellow bobbing and buffing in the mat, I had my doubts. He looked more like a grocer than a burglar. Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side has won. He suddenly felt that he would go without bed and breakfast, thought to be fierce. As for a little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins' part of him regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, "Bilbo, you old fool, you walked right in and put your foot in it." "Pardon me," he said, if I had overheard your words that you were saying. I don't pretend to understand what you're talking about, or your references to burglars, but I think I'm quite right in believing that you think I'm no good. I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago, and I'm quite sure you've all come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doorstep, I had my doubts, but treated it as the right one. Tell me, what do you want done, and I will try it. I have to walk from here to the east of the east and find the wild werewolves of the last desert. I have the great-great-great-granduncles once. Bulrora took, and yes, that was all long ago, said Glowin. I was talking about you. I assure you that there is a mark on the door, the usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement and reasonable reward. That is how it's usually read. You can say expert treasure hunter instead. Instead of burglar if you like, some of them do. It's all the same to us. Gandalf said that there was a man of the sort in these parts looking for a job at once, and he managed to arrange a meeting here this Wednesday tea time. Of course there is a mark, said Gandalf. I put it there myself, for very good reasons. You asked me to find the 14th man of your expedition, and I chose Mr. Baggins. Just let anyone say I chose the wrong man or the wrong house, and you can stop at 13 and have all the bad luck you like, or go back to digging coal. He scowled so angrily at Gowan that the dwarf huddled back in his chair, and when Bilbo tried to open his mouth to ask a question, he turned and frowned at him and stuck out his bushy eyebrows, till Bilbo shut his mouth tight with a snap. That's right, said Gandalf. Let's have no more arguments. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. If I say he's a burglar he is, or will be when the time comes. There is a lot more to him than you guess, and a whole deal more than he has any idea of himself. You may all live to thank me yet. Now, Bilbo, my boy, fetch the lamp and let's have a little light on this. On the table in the light of a big lamp with a red shade, he spread the piece of parchment rather like a map. This was made by Thorin, your grandfather Thorin, he said, in answer to the dwarf's excited questions. It is a plan of the mountain. I don't see how this will help us very much, said Thorin disappointedly after a glance. I know the mountains well enough and the lands about it. I know where Mirkwood is, and where the Withering Hearth, and where the great dragons breed. There is a dragon marked red on the mountain, said Bolin, but that'll be easy enough to find him without that, if we ever arrive there. There is one point you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is the secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side, and the hand pointing down to it from the lower outer runes? That marks the secret passage to the lower hills. It may have been secret once, said Thorin, but how do we know it's secret any longer? Old Smaug had lived there long enough now to find out anything there is to know about those caves. He may, but he can't have used it for years and years. Why? Because it is too small. 5 feet high at the door, and 3 may walk abreast, say the runes, but Smaug cannot creep into a hole that size, even when he was a young dragon, certainly not after devouring so many doors and men of Dale. It seems a great big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who only had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved the maps, and in his hole there hung a large one of the county road with all his favourite walks marked in a red ink. How could such a large door be kept secret from everyone outside apart from the dragon? He asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In a lot of ways, said Gandalf, but in what way this one has been hidden we don't know without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess it's a closed door which has been made to look exactly like the side of the mountain. That's the usual dwarf method, and I think it's quite right. I think that's quite right, isn't it? Quite right, said Thorin. Also, went on Gandalf, I forgot to mention that with his map went a key, and a small curious key. Here it is, he said, handing it to Thorin, a key with a long barrel and intriguing wards made of silver. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin, and he fastened it upon a fine chain that hung across his neck and under his jacket. Now things begin to look more hopeful. This news alters them much for the better. So far we had no clear idea of what we would do. We thought of going east as quiet and carefully as we could, as far as Long Lake, and after that the trouble will begin. A long time before that, if I know anything about the roads east, interrupted Gandalf. We might go up there along the river running, and went on Thorin, taking no notice. And so to the ruins of Dale, the old town in the valley there, under the shadow of the mountain. But none of us like the idea of the forest gate. The river runs high and right out of it, through the great cliff, at the south of the mountain, and out there comes the dragon too, far too often, unless he changed his habits. That would be no good, said the wizard, not without a mighty warrior, even a hero. I tried to find one, but the warriors are busy fighting one another in distant lands, and this neighborhood heroes are scarce, or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes are used for trees, and shields are as cradles or dish covers, and dragons are comfortably far off. That is why I settled on burglary, especially since I remember the existence of this side door. and our little bit of Baggins, the burglar, the chosen and selected burglar. So now let's go get on with and make some plans. Very well then, said Thorn. Supposing the burglar expert gives us some ideas or suggestions. He turned with mock politeness to Bilbo. First, I would like to know a bit more about things, said he, feeling all a bit confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far tookishly determined to go on with things. I mean, there's a lot of gold in the dragon, and all that. How did it get there, and who did it belong to, and so on and further. Bless me, said Thorn. Haven't you got a map? And didn't you hear our song? And haven't we talking about this for hours? All the same, I would like to have it all plain and clear, said he, obstinately putting his business manner and doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional, and live up to Gandalf's recommendation. Also, I would like to know about risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, and remuneration, and so forth. By which he means, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? Oh, very well, said Thorn. Long ago, my grandfather Thor's time, our family was driven out of the far north, and came back with all the wealth and tools to this mountain on the map. It has been discovered by my far ancestor Thrain the Old, but now they mined and tunneled it, and made huger holes and greater workshops. In addition, I believe they found a good deal of gold and a great many jewels too, and they grew immensely rich and famous. And my grandfather was king under the mountain again, and treated with great reverence by mortal men who lived to the south, and gradually spread up the river running, as far as the valley overshadowed by the mountain. They built the merry town of Dale in there, and in those days, kings used to send for our smith and reward even the least skillfully most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices and pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Together, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of most marvelous and magical toys, the like which is not found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and a toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Undoubtedly that was brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, you know, from men and elves and dwarves, wherever they can find them, and they guard their plunder as long as they live, and never enjoy a single brass of it. Indeed, they are hardly known to do a good bit of work from the bad, though they usually have good notion for the current market value, and they can't make a thing for themselves, not even mend a little loose scale on their armor. There were lots of dragons in the north in those days, and the gold was probably getting scarce up there, and the dwarves were flying south or getting killed, and all the general waste and destruction that the dragons make going from bad to worse. There was one especially greedy and strong and wicked, one called Smug. One day he flew into the air and came south. The first we heard of it was a noise like a hurricane coming from the north, and the pine trees of the mountains creaked and cracked in the wind. Some of the dwarves who happened to be outside and I was one lucky, fine adventurous lad in those days I always wondered about, and it saved my life at that day. Well, from a good way off, we saw the dragon settle down on a mountain in a spout of flame, and then he came down by the slopes, and when he reached the woods, they all went up in fire. By the time all the bells were ringing in the dale, and the warriors were arming, the dwarves rushed out of their great hole, but there was a dragon waiting for them. None of them escaped that way. The river rushed up in steam, and a fog fell over the dale, and in the fog the dragon came upon them and destroyed most of the warriors, the usual unhappy story. It was only too common in those days. Then he went back and crept into the front gate and routed out all the halls and lanes and tunnels, alleys, cellars, mansions, and passages. After that there were no doors left inside, and he took all the wealth for himself. Probably for that is all the dragon's way, he piled it up in a great heap far inside and slept on it for a bed. Later he used to crawl out of the great gate and come to the Night of Dale, carrying people away, especially maidens, to eat, until Dale was ruined, and all the people dead or gone. What goes on there now I do not know for certain, but I don't suppose anyone lives nearer the mountain than the far edge of the Long Lake nowadays. The few of us that were outside sat and wept and hiding, and cursed smoke, and there we were unexpectedly joined by my father and grandfather, with singed beards. They looked very grim, but they said very little. When I asked how they got away, they told me to hold my tongue, and that one day, in proper time, I would know. After that, we went away. We had to earn our livings and the best we could, and up and down the lands, often sinking as low as blacksmith work or even coal mining. But we have never forgotten our stolen treasure, and even now, when I will allow, we have a good bit laid by, and they are not so badly off. Here, Thorn stroked a gold chain around his neck. We still mean to get it back and bring our cousins home to Smog if we can. I've often worried about my father's and grandfather's escape. I see now that they must have used a privately side door which only they knew about, but apparently they made a map, and I should like to know how Gandalf got a hold of it, and why it did not come down to me, the rightful heir. I did not get a hold of it, I was given it, said the wizard. Your grandfather Thorin was killed, you remember, in the mines of Moria by Azog the Goblin. Curse his name, yes, said Thorin. And Thran, your father, went away on the 21st of April 100 years ago, last Thursday, and has never been seen by you since. True, said Thorn. Well, your father gave me this to give to you, and if I have chosen my own time and way of handing it over, you can hardly blame me, considering the trouble I had to go through to find you. Your father could not even remember his own name when he gave me the paper, and he never told me yours, so on the whole, I think I ought to be praised and thanked. Here it is, said he, handing the map to Thorn. I don't understand, said Thorn, and Bilbo felt that he would like to say the same. The explanation did not seem to explain. Your grandfather, said the wizard slowly and grimly, gave the map to his son for safety before he went to the mines of Moria. Your father went away to try his luck with the map after your grandfather was killed, and lots of adventures of the most unpleasant sort he had, but he never got near the mountain. How he got there I don't know, but I found him a prisoner in the dungeons of the Necromancer. Whatever were you doing there? asked Thorn with a shudder, and all the dwarfs shivered. Never you mind, I was finding things out as usual, and nasty dangerous business it was. Even I, Gandalf, only just escaped. I tried to save your father, but it was too late. He was witless and wandering, and had forgotten almost everything except the map and the key. We had long ago paid the goblins of Moria, said Thorn. We must give a thought to the Necromancer. Don't be absurd. He's an enemy far beyond the powers of all the dwarfs put together, if they all could be collected from the four corners of the world. The one thing your father wished for was his son to read the map and to use the key. The dragons in the mountain are far more than big enough task for you. Here, said Bilbo, and accidentally said aloud. Hear what? They all said, turning around suddenly towards him, and he was so flustered that he answered, Hear what I have to say. What's that? They asked. Well, I should say that you ought to go east and have a look around. After all, there is a side door, and dragons must sleep sometimes. I suppose if you sit on the front step long enough, I dare say you will find something. Might as well you don't know. I think we have talked long enough for one night, if you know what I mean. What about a bed and an early start and all that? I'll give you all a good breakfast before you go. Before you go? I suppose you mean aren't you the burglar? And isn't sitting on the doorstep your job, not speaking of getting inside the door? But I agree about bed and breakfast. I like 6 poached eggs on my ham when starting on the journey. Fried, not poached, and mind you, don't break them. After all the others ordered their breakfast without so much as a please, they all got up. Little Hobbit had to find rooms for all of them, and filled all his bedrooms with beds made on chairs and sofas, before he got all of them stowed away and went to his own little bed, very tired and not altogether happy. One thing he did make up his mind about was not going to bother getting up very early and cooking everyone else's breakfast. The tookishness was wearing off, and he was now not quite sure that he had gone on a journey in the morning. As he lay in the bed, he could hear Thorn still humming to himself in the bedroom next to him. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away at break of day, to find our long forgotten gold. Bobo went to sleep with that in his ears, and it gave him a very uncomfortable dream. It was long after the break of day when he woke up. And that, folks, concludes Chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. Until the next time, folks, take care.